As 10 prisoners of Auschwitz were rounded up to be killed, one, a young man who was a husband and a father, cried at the thought of never seeing his family again. Then, as they were about to march to their deaths, prisoner 16670 approached the commandant and calmly and softly said, "I wish to die in place of that father of a family. I beg you to accept the offer of my life." And so he was killed in place of the young man. Although he was given a number in place of his name is not forgotten. Born January 8, 1894, in Poland, Raymond Kolbe. Once, as a young boy, after pulling a prank, his mother screamed, "I do not know what will become of you." This moment changed him. His behavior differed, and he acted odd at times. His mother noticed that he started slipping off to the room the family kept for their altar for the Mother of God. He would stay there for long periods of time, crying. His mother eventually confronted him. She said to him, "See here, Raymond, what is wrong with you? Why do you cry like a little girl? My child, you must tell your mother everything. Do not be disobedient." Trembling, he answered, "Mamma, when you said to me, 'Raymond, I do not know what will become of you,' it upset me very much, and so I went to ask the Blessed Virgin just what I would become. Later at church, I asked her once again. Then she appeared to me, holding 2 crowns, a white one and a red one. Tenderly she looked at me and asked me which one I would choose. The white signified that I would always be pure, and the red that I would die a martyr. Then I answered the Blessed Virgin, 'I choose both.' She smiled and disappeared." His mother would go on to say, "From that day on, he was no longer the same. Often with beaming face, he would speak to me of martyrdom. This was his great dream." At this time, he was 10 years old. 3 years later, he joined a minor seminary at Lvov, which is now Lviv in Ukraine, and at the time was Austrian territory. On September 11th, 1911, Maximilian Kolbe pronounced his vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience for 3 years in the Order of Friars Minor Conventual. A year later, because of his intellectual talents, he was sent to the Gregorian University in Rome. By November 1st, 1914, Maximilian Kolbe pronounced his solemn vows. A year later, at the age of 21, Maximilian received his doctorate in philosophy at the Gregorian University. In 1916, he was ordained subdeacon, and in 1918, priest. On April 29, 1918, he said his first Mass. Then, a year later, in July, he received his doctor's degree in theology at the International Seraphic College of his order. In 1917, Maximilian Kolbe started an evangelization movement called the Militia of the Immaculata. The goal of the Militia of the Immaculata was to conquer for Christ all souls in the entire world to the end of time through the Immaculate Mother. From 1917 to 1939, the militia grew from 5 members all the way up to 691,219. The militia would be spread around the world and was embraced by Popes Benedict XV and Pius XI. Maximilian had an idea to increase the membership of the Militia of the Immaculata by publication. He named his published review The Night of the Immaculata. This publication began to grow, and by 1924, 12,000 copies were sold. By 1926, 45,000 copies were sold. Kolbe and the other friars had to relocate several times to accommodate the expanding publications. After purchasing land, they began to build housing and a chapel. It was, in October 1927, their simple shelter lacked roofing and heating, which resulted in it getting covered in snow. On November 7, 1927, the eve of the great feast of the Immaculate Conception, the land was dedicated to the Blessed Virgin Mary. They named this place Neopokalano, which, when translated from Polish to English, is the City of the Immaculata. After the chapel and living quarters were built, other buildings were risen to house the printing and the distribution of the Night of the Immaculata. The expansion didn't stop there. The city kept growing. A college and more sleeping quarters for the members of the order, a hospital, electric plant, firehouse, and a radio station all were built too. This was all achieved by 1938. In 1939, an airport was erected. The city became the largest religious community, and the circulation of the Knight grew to nearly 1 million copies. Eventually, 9 other reviews were printed and distributed. The friars started printing books and pamphlets not only in Polish but in many languages. With this success, Father Kolbe thought it good to build another city of the Immaculata, this time in Japan. In Japan, the new city, Migenzai no Sono, or Garden of the Immaculata, was built. On the mountainside, overlooking the property, there was a statue of Buddha. Disturbed by this, Maximilian also bought the property it was on. The Buddha statue was replaced by a statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary. The city was built on a small hill just a 20-minute walk north of Nagasaki. After Maximilian's death, when the atomic bombs were dropped on Japan, Migenzai no Sono was not damaged whatsoever. Although Maximilian intended to open a city in India, difficulties as well as the war delayed the project. In 1936, Father Maximilian returned to Poland. On September 1, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. By September 19th, the German police arrived at Neopoglano. Maximilian was loaded into a truck and delivered alongside other religious of that community to Amitz. Gradually, the prisoners of Poland were being released, and by December 8th, the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, Kolbe returned. Although reunited again in the city, the Nazis turned it into a concentration camp, able to hold 2,000 prisoners. Kolbe and the friars tended to the sick and spread the knowledge and love of God to the victims. On February 17, 1941, the Gestapo returned and arrested Maximilian and 4 other priests because they were accused of helping the Polish resistance movement by allowing them to use their printing press for secret newspapers. However, this was not true. Maximilian, when he was approached by the resistance for this purpose, turned them down, knowing that it would jeopardize the work he was doing. And when the Gestapo asked whether he had information about the resistance, he refused to tell what he knew. Then he and 4 other priests were sent to Pawiak. On May 28th, Kolbe was delivered to Auschwitz. While in Block 14, a prisoner escaped. As punishment, 10 of the blockmates would be starved to death. The prisoners of Block 14 were forced to stand in scorching heat all day without water, only receiving a half-hour break in soup. After spending the rest of the day standing under the sun, the 10 were chosen. One of the 10 was a young man. He was a husband and a father. He wept at the thought of never seeing his family again. As they were about to march to their deaths, Father Maximilian approached the commandant and calmly and softly said, "I wish to die in place of that father of a family. I beg you to accept the offer of my life." In the death cell, Kolbe and the other prisoners would get so immersed in prayer that when the guards came to check in on them, they didn't even notice. The orderly, a Polish interpreter, reported that Kolbe asked for nothing while the other prisoners would ask for water. Father Maximilian gave hope to his fellow cellmates and never despaired. After 2 weeks, 4 of them remained while the cell was required for other prisoners. The infirmarian came and injected the remaining prisoners with carbonic acid. Before lifting his left arm for injection, Kolbe spoke his last words, "Ave Maria." The orderly, upon returning to the corpse later, said, "When I opened the iron door, he was no longer alive. His face was unusually radiant. His eyes were opened wide, staring into space. He seemed as though in rapture. I shall never forget that sight." Saint Maximilian Kolbe died on August 14, 1941, on the vigil of the Feast of Our Lady's Assumption. He was canonized on October 10, 1982, as a martyr, thus fulfilling his childhood dream and vision. Thank you for watching, and God bless.